Hi Jane Knights, I am the Austen reviewer. So last month we talked about how I'm not particularly fond of Emma, just mostly in advance of me reviewing any versions of it and my prejudice inadvertently shining through, though as I attempted to stress I will try to limit that as much as possible. But I thought it might bring up some question of what is my favorite out of the Jane Austen novels. Hello. You're so silly. Anyway. So I thought I'd just quickly rank the novels. This is not the short stories, any of her earlier work, or her notoriously unfinished novels. So this is my personal ranking. I'm going to give kind of my explanation a bit behind them, but yeah, it's just my personal ranking at this point in time. Opinion, you don't have to necessarily agree with me, though I would be curious to get your thoughts, but let's get into it. You may have guessed from that other video, Emma is my least favorite of the novels, mostly just because of the main character. From a literary standpoint, I do find the book interesting, but it's just not something that I'll go to read for pleasure. So that's my least favorite out of the 6. Coming up from there is probably going to be probably Northanger Abbey, but that one's a little bit of a question mark. I have only actually read that one twice, and I haven't seen very many versions of it because I haven't sought it out, but it's rarely done well, at least from what I've understood from other fellow Janeites that have bemoaned some of the adaptations with me. Where I'm usually going off about Mansfield Park, they'll go tell me, it's like, well, have you seen the whichever version of Northanger Abbey? So I assume that my opinion of that one will probably actually improve as I actually get into it more, which will be a nice thing. One thing I guess I should mention is that Jane Austen's novels are quite distinctive in their style. So Emma has a very distinctive style from any of the other ones. Northanger Abbey is actually almost kind of a parody of some of the Gothic romance novels and the entire romancing of them by the general populace of women at that time period. So it's almost like satire in a way, and there are elements of kind of mystery to it, and then it subverts these, it creates an expectation, and then it's if you like mystery, it's probably closer to that than most of any of the other Jane Austen books that you'll get. It is enjoyable. I haven't read it that much, which is probably why it's here on this list, but I do still enjoy it and I do recommend it, but it's my number 5. So my number 4. Number 4. Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Sense and Sensibility on this one. And this is where this ranking gets really funny. It's purely my taste, and it's very subjective. All of her books are written very, very well, but this one, there's a lot of different things for unpacking in the rereading, and I just finished watching an adaptation of it, which hit some points really well and missed spectacularly with others, in my opinion. But it's a book that I enjoy, and you can think about the characters and kind of debate back and forth with some of them, but it's just not one that I'll necessarily rush to. Though I do think that as far as adaptations go, it's actually probably the one that actually has some of the most consistent and consistently good ones. Though as we go through the reviewing process, we'll see if that actually holds up or not. So Sense and Sensibility is my number 4. So number 3. Number 3 is, for me, Persuasion. It was the last one of her novels, completed novels, that she wrote, and it's a little more serious and thoughtful and kind of introspective almost than most of her other work. So it's not as sparkly as say Sense and Sensibility or Pride and Prejudice are, the main characters are more on the mature side, and you get to see some of the petty silliness that you usually get to see. And would you stop making me pet you? What a crazy little dog you are. So it's more on the serious side. It is also one of the shortest of her novels. Persuasion is my number 3. It's an interesting read. It's a really quick one to get through if I just want a really fast Austen fix and I don't want to end up in the middle of it somewhere before I have to go do something else. But yeah, it's a nice, thoughtful one. It's somewhat predictable, but, well, that's also coming from someone that's read it multiple times. Maybe it's not actually that predictable. Anyway, that's my number 3. So, now we're down to what is arguably the most beloved of Jane Austen's books, and what is generally one of the most popular to object to, that being Pride and Prejudice and Mansfield Park, respectively. So, which one of those takes number 1? Well, this may or may not surprise some people, but I actually prefer, between the two of them, Mansfield Park. And there's a reason for that, but I'll talk a bit about Pride and Prejudice was the first Austen novel that I read. It was the first one I think that I saw an adaptation of. It's the second book that I read multiple times through. It's also the book that I have read the most number of times. Somewhere in the 20s, I lost count. Such as it is. The characters in it are probably the most sparkling. You have a great diversity of characters. I'm done petting you, though. He's just happy I'm sitting still in one spot. You look very yellow in this light. Yes, you do. You're a crazy little dog. Anyway. It's like the characters have their intricacies, though some of them you get to object to a little more than others. The dialogue and the witty back and forth is excellent. It is probably her being witty at her finest. It's really one of the lightest novels, though you have a lot of social commentary from the time period you can make with it. You can use it to explore dynamics and relationships between a lot of times and people in different time periods, and there's a reason why it's so popular. Everyone pretty much loves Elizabeth Bennet, and people dream over Mr. Darcy a lot, but I'll have to do a video on, it's like, he may not actually be as great as we all like to, or we might not actually love Mr. Darcy if we met him in real life. It's odd because there's a lot you can say about Pride and Prejudice, but I'm not sure how much of it would really be done justice to in a short video like this. I'm going to end up doing more commentary on it and others, so I'm not too worried about that at this point in time. But that's that. Pride and Prejudice is my number 2. So, number 1 is Mansfield Park. Now, for people that haven't heard of Mansfield Park, which quite frankly is a lot of them, that may seem a little curious. For people that do know Mansfield Park and actively don't like it, they may feel that this is something of an absolute betrayal of Austen. Especially when you consider that the main heroine of the story, Jane Austen, famously carried a little notebook, and she would actually keep score of how many people liked and didn't like the main character, which was, I do believe, something of a surprise to her. She did think, when she wrote Emma, that most people wouldn't like the heroine, and I do end up fitting into that category, but a lot of people do like the forgiveness aspect. I've heard a lot in that people don't like Mansfield Park, mostly because of the main character, Fanny Price, being so quiet and mousy, if you will, or she's mistreated by her relatives and she doesn't stand up for herself. She doesn't have a whole bunch of sparkling speeches. She's not really known for her wit. But one of the things that I do like about her is her steadfastness of character, but the other thing with the novel as a whole is all the characters are very human. I'm going to do a video where I'm going to debate who is the primary villain in the different novels. And with Mansfield Park, there's kind of one where you can really point, it's like, okay, there's like next to nothing this person does that has any redeemable features. But for basically all the others, there is argument to be made for and against their actions. Even the ones where you think, well, this is one of the good characters. There's still things that's like, this is not a white mark on their resume. It is probably the most morally and from a character perspective, I think, complex of all the novels. It's also the longest one. If you want to read, or you're interested in Mansfield Park, read the book. There aren't really any good adaptations of it. I'm sorry. I'll get into those more when I do them. There's very few of them, again, due to the books not being all that popular. And they're just... a lot of intricacies with the book. I really don't think it gets as much credit as it really deserves, but I do find that the more thoughtful your reader base gets, generally the more Mansfield Park comes up with being a preferred thing for reading. Of all the Austen novels, I've read it probably the second amount of times, Pride and Prejudice being first. So Mansfield Park, of all Jane Austen's full-length novels, is probably my favorite. It's the one that I get the most out of. It provides a lot of thought and changing relationships with the characters. Like, I had to read the novel 9 times before I could stand Henry Crawford, and then over several other readings I came to more understand him and kind of not so much excuse his behavior, but at least understand more of it, because when I first read, I strongly disliked that character. We'll leave it at that. But so yeah, that's my rankings of them. Emma, Northanger Abbey, Sense and Sensibility, Persuasion, Pride and Prejudice, and Mansfield Park. But yeah, of the novels, that's a little easier to rank. Like, I've read a couple of volumes out of her Juvenilia, and I might do a thing talking about that if people are interested. But a lot of the stories in there, one that she wrote those when she was very young. This was quite a bit before any of the novels. So you can still see some of her wit and her biting satire and stuff, but most of them are incomplete. So yeah, that's my individual rankings of them. I'll probably start, now that I've kind of gotten some of my personal preferences out of the way, I'll start getting into more of the thoughts on characters and thought experiments and plots and stuff and some things like that, starting about next month. I'm also thinking of, because most people have at least heard of Pride and Prejudice, even if they don't necessarily know who Jane Austen is, but even some of the people that are fans of that don't necessarily know much about the rest of her work. So I am thinking of, for the next 6 months or so, doing an extra video, because I only put out 3 videos right now, but doing an extra one on the 4th Tuesday, just going through the plots of the books. Like, I even know some people where they've seen some of the movie adaptations of Pride and Prejudice, but they've never actually read the book, so they don't really know what we're ranting about when we're going on about all the changes from the story. So I'm seriously thinking about doing that. We'll see. So thank you for watching. Hope to see you next time, and I remain as ever till the next time we meet, the Austen Reviewer. Stop moving. Thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more content, share with your friends to help my channel gain a bit more exposure. I would appreciate it if you would have a look at my Patreon. It's not required by any means, but it does help to support me and just allow me to make more of these videos and put them out on a more regular basis. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.